there, welcome to my channel. My name is Linda. I have some fun crafts for you today. Now today's video is a compilation of a few of my favorite fall crafts from last year, 2024. I put them all in one video for you so that you remember what you need to do this year, because you probably forgot last year, right? So that's why this video is here for you now. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Let's get going with some favorite apple crafts. Here's project number one. I've got two sets of fabrics here. Most of them came from Walmart, a few from Jubilee Fabrics. The ones that did come from Jubilee, I'll have a link down below. I will have a free pattern printable for you. This is for this one, of course. Link to my blog in the description box. So the first thing I'm doing, I'm just going to cut one set of fabrics here on camera, and we're going to go through the whole thing. And then the second apple, I kind of do the majority of it off camera because I'm already showing you with this one. I'm cutting 4 of this fabric with our apple / eyeball shape. And for the leaf, I'm going to elect to use some batting here. I do get it at Walmart, and I'm cutting 2 pieces of fabric for that and 1 piece of batting. So I have 4 apple, 2 leaf, and 1 leaf batting. All right, and then I'm ripping about a 1-inch strip of fabric. Now our eyeball / apple shape, I need to get off the eyeball, it's about 7 inches long and about 4 1/4 inches wide, just in case you wanted to know that. And then what we're going to do, if you're a gluer, you're going to put 2 of these apple pieces together. On one side, you're going to glue that, but you want to start at least probably about a 1/2 inch down from the top on each section and glue all the way down. If you're a sewer, about a 1/2 inch from the top, glue all the way down to the point at the bottom, or sew all the way down to the point at the bottom. So here I'm sewing it all the way down. And then you can see I'm about a 1/2 inch from the top. You might even want to go a little bit more than a 1/2 inch. It's quite a tight squeeze, but I make it. Here's what it looks like from the inside. And then you're going to apply your next apple shape. Again, about a 1/2 inch from the top. If you're a gluer, glue all the way down to the end of the point, or sew all the way down. I'll do that one off camera. Here I've got 3 now. This is what it looks like from the inside. And then we're going to add our last shape. Now this one you're going to do both sides. So gluing or sewing all the way down, again 1/2 inch from the top down to the point, and then to the other side. Again, 1/2 inch from the top, gluing and sewing all the way down to the bottom. This is what 4 looks like so far. Now I'm going to close our apple up. Again, leaving that little space there. We need to leave that space because we have to flip our apple, right? Got to flip the fabric, and we need to be able to stuff it. All right? Let me show you what that looks like. So we got our little opening here. We're wrong side out, and then let's flip it. Nice and easy. Then we'll set that aside and work on the leaf. If you're a gluer, obviously glue everything together, whether or not you use batting. I just like batting. It gives it a quilted look. If you're a sewer, I'm going to go all the way around the edge and then once down the center just to give it a little decoration. If you're a gluer, you could elect to take a little hand stitching down the center just to give that leaf a little definition, but it's totally optional. With the color thread I'm using, you don't really see it all that much. I just was too lazy to change it to a darker thread, but in my brain, I know I did it. All right, and I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second, getting it all sewn. Here's what it looks like. See, it's just barely visible, but I know it's there. Now, since the leaf is done, let's stuff our apple, and you need to kind of stuff it nice and tight. We don't want like a shrunken in apple, like it's not good enough to eat. We want it nice and tight, so we want to take a bite into the apple, right? Now I'm using some crochet thread, and I'm making a really thick knot, almost like a quadruple knot at the end. And I'm taking my needle, a long needle, like a upholstery needle, from the bottom outside of the pumpkin apple, all the way up through the center to the top until the end reaches the knot right there. Okay, and then you're going to take your needle, turn it back around, and go from the top down to the bottom, and then pull it nice and tight here. See, it looks like I have a little divot at the bottom, just like an apple looks like, right? And then I'm going to come back in through the bottom, up through the top again. So we're going to do this a couple of times so we really get that divot. Look, and pull it nice and tight from the top so you get that divot. And then come in just on one of your little open little segments there and kind of make a little stitch in it. All right? I'm going to just do one more little stitch here, and leave it like that for a minute, okay? Got a nice little divot, and leave it. Now, what I'm going to do, see, one of my little areas kind of came undone stitching. I'm just going to glue that together don't worry, because our leaf and all that will hide it if you need to fix that. So for a stem, you could use like a branch, you could use a dowel, you could use, here it comes, cinnamon sticks. I have these long cinnamon sticks. I was going to go with the cinnamon stick, but I'm going to go with the branch and then use the cinnamon stick on the next apple. So now I want my apple to have the same indent on the top as we do on the bottom, but this is optional, okay? I just want it to look like that. But the first thing before we do that is I'm gonna come around and just make like a gathering stitch on all our little tops of our apple segments there, okay? And then we're gonna get our branch in the center. We're not gonna pull our thread closed yet. We just wanna get the thread ready. We're gonna get our branch in the center, and I'm gonna get my leaf glued right over that spot where I had to glue it to hide it. And now we're gonna pull our thread and get it nice and tight up against our branch, okay? Then I'm gonna bring that thread under the leaf so it's hidden, and I'm gonna go from the top down to the bottom. I'm going to have to use some pliers here to pull it out because it gets kind of tough to pull it out. All right, and I'm going to slow it way down here. Watch as I pull it, the branch at the top. See how it sinks in? It's pulling that center down, okay? And then I'm going to just come back up from the bottom to the top again. I'm going to pull it tight, and then I'm just going to go ahead and just make a little knot here and tie it off. All right, here we go, making our little knot. Don't worry, this little knot and all this thread will get hidden. Now, if you're a gluer, you can skip the whole thread part if you want. You don't have to do a knot at the bottom or anything at the top. Just glue it all closed and skip it. All right, here's what it looks like all done. And now what I want to do, I've got 2 pieces of muslin material and a piece of batting. Glue it all together if you're a gluer. I sewed it all together off camera because we're going to make a little tag for our apple. And I'm going to use these clickable stamps from Michaels. I'm going to use my VersaFine ink. I'll have a link down below to the stamps from Michaels and VersaFine ink for you, and I'm just going to stamp in fresh apples. I love these stamps because they're just so nice and country looking. And then I'm going to glue my tag right over where I made that knot, right? Hides it up, and then I'm going to take my strip of fabric and I'm going to just tie a little knot in here and put some glue on our little branch so that it holds that fabric down. Kind of crumple up the ends, the tails a little bit, and then I'm going to take some Distress Oxide ink in Vintage Photo. I'm going to ink up my leaf a little bit. I'm going to ink up around on my tag a little bit, give it a little bit more of a rustic look, around on the fabric a little bit, around at the bottom. I really do it at the bottom because on real apples they kind of have that shadowing at the bottom. And that makes this apple done. Now let's move on to our next apple. For this apple, it turned out to be a mistake, but then I'm like, I kind of like it. Caffeine was wearing off and I went to sew it and I realized I sewed it with the right sides out. But I'm like, I'm going to make it outside in apple or an inside out apple. And I stuffed it, right? Because I've done this with the pumpkins before and I love how those look. And I'm coming in, so I sewed it, seams out, stuffed it, and I'm coming in again with our thread and doing that same technique with like the quadruple knot, right? Coming in from the bottom to the top, then back down from the top to the bottom, and then back up from the bottom to the top and pulling it nice and tight so we have that nice indented bottom. Again, if you're a gluer, just skip this whole thread part. And then I'm going to do a little bit of, my gather stitch around all my little opened end segment pieces here so that we can pull those tight later around the cinnamon stick that I chose to use on this one. I'm kind of pulling that cotton in there so I can get my cinnamon stick in there and glue it in. Perfect. And now I've got my leaf already sewed, so I'm going to just go ahead and ink that up now. And my tag, I'm inking around the edges and the back side in case the back gets seen. And on this one, I'm going to stamp Apple Orchard with the Michaels clickable stamps. Really cute. Right, I'm going to glue my leaf in, spot there in the end center, and then I'm going to go ahead and now, remember, I'm going to take my needle down from the top down to the bottom using my pliers because I want to make that indent at the top as well, and then pull my needle back up from the bottom to the top in the center. Again, you could skip this part, and then I pulled it really tight, and now I'm just making a little knot and pulling it all together, pulling my gathering stitches and everything together, and then I'm gluing my tag on there right on top, and then I've got a little strip of fabric here, again, just a little knot around it, gluing it to the cinnamon stick so it stays in place, and that makes this project complete. Let's move into apple project number 2. For this project, I found one of these thick apples, actually 2 of them, at Dollar Tree. I'm just going to use one for today, and the first thing I'm going to do is just gently get the leaf off. I'm not going to reuse the leaf. You totally could, but I am going to save it. And what I'm going to do is cut the stem off, and then I'm going to sand everything. And I was going to use a dowel at first for the top, but then I believe I end up using a branch. And look at a great view of my arm here, cutting the stem off. I didn't quite have it right. And then I'm using my little table saw there to, cut the dowel, but I end up, like I said, not using it. And now I'm sanding flat where that leaf was on there and kind of sanding the front a little bit. And then I don't like all the sharp edges, right? So I'm just kind of rounding those off with my sander, all the cut edges, and just making it look a little more rustic country that way by kind of sanding those down. And of course I do take the label and everything off of the back. Here it is. And then I'll sand the sticky off. And I'm going to paint this whole thing. And you could make a set of 2. It would be cute, but I wanted to save it because I had another idea for this apple. I already drilled a hole, which could fit the dowel, of course. But like I said, I end up using a branch instead because it gives it a little more rusticness. This is what I'm going to go with, okay? I think that looks cute, right? All right, so I'm going to use Dixie Belle chalk paint in the color Rustic Red for this, and then Dixie Belle chalk paint in the color Pine Cone. It's a new color I haven't tried, but I think it's going to work great. And then I'm going to just start out, of course, by, like I said, save your leaf if you want to use it. So if you do the leaf, some kind of green color for that. But I'm going to start out by painting my apple, of course, front, back, sides, a couple of coats, all right? And then I will sand it off camera to give it a nice distressed look. And then here it is all sanded. See, it just kind of gives it a nicer look. Front and back and sides sanded. And then I'm going to just take a pencil and make some wavy lines across the front and sides. If you haven't guessed it yet, because of the color paint we're using, we're going to make a caramel apple. Now, I know this kind of looks a little green, but I can't remember if it's on camera or off, but I used that vintage photo ink like we used in the first project, and I just kind of ink around the edges and stuff and give it a nicer, kind of brownish tone. But I think the camera makes it look a little bit greenish tint, but in person it has a little bit browner tone, but I make it a little bit more browner tone with the ink. Okay? So just making the nice edges there because I'm not going to completely cover the edges with, one of our upcoming steps. Here's what that looks like, and I sanded that as well. I was going to use this side, but then I ventured to this side, and then at the end I go back to the other side. I've got 2 pieces of muslin fabric again and some batting. If you're a gluer, you can glue all those together. We're going to make a little tag. Here I have it all sewn. And then I'm going to take my ink. I sewed it off camera if you didn't know that. And take my ink and ink or just around the edges. I always leave the center open so when we stamp our image, it kind of gives a halo, a silhouette around it. Makes those stamped words, appear even more. And I'm going to stamp caramel apple on here. Again with the Michaels clickable stamps. Link in my description box. All right, ready to go. And now I'm going to glue in my stem using my favorite Beacon Fabri-Tac glue and put a little bit of glue right inside that hole as well. Get that stem in there. And now I'm taking some black chalk paint, just mixed with water, my fan brush. I dip it in the paint, wipe off the excess, and then I tap the fan brush to get some splatters. And I do splatter the sides and the other back off camera. The back side of the apple. It's not a video without my made-up words. Anyway, so for the fake nuts, I found this, I think it was a video, and they showed this package of pet bedding, and I think it had a parrot and a hamster on it. They found it at Walmart. I could never find mine, but if you want to look, great. If not, I'll have a link down below to the Etsy shop that I found it in under fake nuts, and this looked like the picture that I saw in the video, and it works great. So we have some fake nuts, aka pet bedding. I'm going to start with this spray adhesive to kind of get the first layer of nuts on there. You could totally use, which I think would work great, Mod Podge or something like that. But I start in with, like I said, the first layer. I spray it nice, and then I just dump these fake nuts on real heavy, tap off the excess, and then once that's all set, then I go back in for like the second layer, spreading or drizzling my Fabri-Tac glue over the first layer, and then of course, adding the fake nuts on top of that. Now, I don't know, of course, I'm keeping the bottom clear because our apple has to set up. So don't get any on the very bottom, as I just showed you. I'll show you here again. See, bottom is nice and clear. Our apple's got to set up, and it does. We're on the right track. Now, I'm with you. This is my first time using this stuff, so I cannot answer any questions on how long this stays off or does it fall off really easy. I don't know. We're going to learn this together. But I think like Mod Podge, you know, I don't know if you could seal over Mod Podge over the top with it because it might just brush it off. I don't know. I'm going to try some spray sealer off camera and see if that works to kind of seal it in. I don't know. If somebody has any ideas, leave it in the description box down below. But I think by doing the second layer with Fabri-Tac glue, it kind of helped hold the first layer in. I'm not sure, but I think it looks really cute with double nuts. And I purposely didn't cover kind of that area above the nuts, the caramel line that you see, because we want to be able to see it's caramel and nuts, right? But yeah, 1 or 2 nuts did fall off, but I'm going to try the sealer. We'll see what happens. But again, any ideas? Comment down below. I'm going to add in a ripped strip of fabric as we've been doing with our other projects, and we'll continue to do with our upcoming projects today. Make a little bow here, and I'm going to glue it onto the stem. We already made our tag, and I have a little flat rusty metal star here. I'll leave the link down below to where I got those, and I'm using a little cute safety pin. I'm wrinkle and crinkling the tails of my bows because I always like those to stay in position. And you can see my bow is up above on the branch a little bit because otherwise the tag kind of covered stuff down below too much. So I'm going to pin the star, the tag, everything to the center of that bow, and then I'm going to kind of glue it over to the side here. That makes this project complete. Let's move on to apple project number 3. For this project, I'm using these heart on dowels from Dollar Tree. If you have those thick hearts, those thick wooden hearts without the dowels, I think those would look fabulous, but I didn't have any. But our Dollar Tree at least had these. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut the dowels off about a 1/2 inch off the bottom so that we have a nice straight stretch for that to set up. Okay, we're going to use these hearts and make them look like apples. Stay with me. Once that's off, I'm going to go ahead and sand these up. I really want to make them country looking, and so I'm sanding and rounding off all those straight, sharp edges. Okay, front and back, both sides, and then we'll get into painting these things. I'm going to use a couple of different color reds and a green here. All right, so here's Dixie Belle in the color Rustic Red, Dixie Belle in the color Barn Red, and this green is just 2 different colors of green I mixed together. Couldn't tell you what they were to start with, both chalk paints. And I'm going to do 2 coats of each one, front and back. And then off camera, I'll go ahead and sand and distress everything because, well, this video is long enough and y'all know how to sand and distress, right? Hopefully so. And if you don't want to sand and distress, you don't have to. What do I like to say? You do you. All right, once these are done painted, then I will show you how they look all nice and distressed up. I think they look really country farm cute. And here it is. Look how cute those look. Now, I know, like I said, I've got 2 different reds and a green. You could actually make one of these, maybe like one of those kind of yellowish looking apples would look really cute. So now I have 3 pieces of ripped fabric here, and they're about just a little over 6 inches long, maybe about 1.5 inches wide. I'm going to fold each one in half, and at the raw edge, the cut edge of each one, I got a little leaf here I cut out of fabric from another project I was going to do, and I'm just cutting a leaf shape out of both of those ends, like folded together. Do you know what I'm saying? And then I'm sanding each one to give it a distress look, and when I open it, it kind of looks like an untied bow tie. Does that make sense? Now, you don't have to do this at all. You can just have a ripped piece of fabric, but when we tie it around the stem, by kind of cutting that leaf shape on each end, it looks like a couple of leaves. It's going to be cool. Now, I have the gift bag here. It kind of just looks like a paper sack. It's a really thick paper sack, and I'm just cutting some tags here. I have one already done, but of course I need 3 tags. I have 3 apples, and I'm cutting 2 for each tag, and now I'm just wrinkling, crinkling up each one, okay? So, like I said, wrinkle and crinkle up each one. And then once those are done, I'm cutting, yes, you're seeing it, I'm cutting a piece of batting to go between our paper tags here. It's going to look really cute, but you can leave that out if you want. And now I'm just taking my little mini iron here and I'm ironing the tags out. And I'll bring this up to the camera a little bit closer, because once you iron it out, look, it kind of starts to look like, you know, rough leather, right? Worked up leather, old leather. And then taking my Distress Oxide and Vintage Photo, I'm going to ink all these tags up. And then when I bring it up, it really even looks more like, you know, worn leather is what I was trying to say earlier. See, look at that. It looks like worn leather. And I'm sewing it together with, I think I've got a size 14 needle in my sewing machine here. It sews through it just nice and easy. Of course, if you're a gluer, you can just glue it together. Then I'm taking my crocodile tool here and just punching a little hole, and I've got some safety pins here, and then I've got a button, I've got a rusty bell and a rusty star. I'm going to punch a little hole in the rusty star because it kind of broke off a piece of garland I had. And then I'm going to stamp on each of the tags. This one is going to say fresh apples. The next one will say you pick. And the last one that I already did off camera says apple orchard. Here's that right here, and we're ready to go. Now for the stem, a little bit different. I've got 3 really big, long, rusty nails. I picked them out of my husband's bag of nails in the garage, and now I'm just using a drill bit that matches the size of the nails, and I'm drilling down into the apples a little bit so that, you know, we don't just nail the nails right in or hammer the nails right in because it might crack our wood, right? So we want that pile of oil first, and then I'll go ahead and kind of hammer the nails in. They're really long, so it gives us a really long stem, but I'm okay with that. If you like this option, great. You could, you know, drill holes and put a dowel in there or something like that if you think the nail idea looks stupid, but I think it's really cute. And now I sewed around my leaves, so to speak, because I thought that would add some fun personality. And I'm just tying it around the nail, just kind of a little knot here. Now watch, because we cut our leaves out on the ends of this, right? Once I get this into position, look, it's 2 little leaves. Ta-da! But again, you don't have to do that, but I thought that's a cute way to, you know, get our leaves on without making separate leaves to glue on. And I just glue those into place around the nail so that our fabric stays in place. Here's the way this one looks. And then we'll get our last one on, glued into place around that nail, and then this is how this one looks. But again, it would look good either way with just ripped fabric or shaped leaves fabric, I guess, so to speak. Now on the first apple, I'm adding a button and the tag and just kind of pinning it to the center of our leaves. And I'm going to go ahead and ink around the apple and give it a little shadowing and leave the center a little lighter so it gives it a little depth, and kind of crinkle up the bow just a little bit to the side and glue it into place. That apple's done. I'm going to do the same on this apple, ink around the edge. We're going to pin this with our bell to the center of our leaves. Crinkle and glue the tag into place, and I'm going to ink around this one as well. Again, depth. Add the star with the safety pin to the center of this leaf. Crinkle it just slightly to the side and glue it into place. And that makes these 3 apples almost done. I'm taking a little cream paint mixed with water and my fan brush again, adding some splatters. I will add splatters on the back as well and the sides. Now our project is complete. How'd you like them apples? Let's move into project number 4. We're going to start in with some long paint sticks. This is about a 1x1 square dowel. You can have whatever size you want. It's just a scrap piece I had. These are the 2 like slender boards you can get from Dollar Tree. Any board you want will work. This is one of those thick wood circles from Dollar Tree. Whatever wood circle you want work. Dowel, whatever size you want. And then this is just trim board that I actually got at Habitat for Humanity. You can get it at any hardware store. It's about 1/2 inch thick. And then I've got about 1 inch wide. And again, you can do whatever size you want here. So what I've got here, this is a shorter, thicker board from Dollar Tree. I don't want to use it because it is too thick, but I like the length of it. So I'm just marking it on the thinner boards from Dollar Tree so I know where to cut. All right, this board, I wasn't sure at first, but I do end up cutting them down to about 3 inches long, 2 pieces. All right, now on the long paint sticks, you could use short paint sticks. I'm choosing long, and then if I mark them at 8 3/4 inch pieces, I can get 2 pieces per long paint stick. If you choose short pieces, you just need more than 7 sticks to start with. So here I am outside just using my mini table saw, and I'm just cutting my boards down here. I'm not going to bore you with cutting every single one, but you know, cutting some of the major ones. So cutting my 2 thin boards first, then I'm coming into my paint sticks. Obviously, I can cut 14 paint sticks out of my 7 paint sticks, but I only need 13 paint sticks. And I will have the measurements down below in my description box as well. And you may choose to alter this as you like. You might want a bigger wheelbarrow than we're making, or you might want a smaller one, but hopefully you could use this design to kind of, you know, inspire you to make your own. Now we're working into this nice pile, not to the back or to the right, but right here in the center of sanding everything. I don't want any words on my paint sticks, so I'm sanding that off. And then all my boards, you know, the sharper, straighter edges, you know, I'm rounding those off so that all my wood pieces are rounder around all, you know, the areas of course. And again, you can make this whatever size you want. I do end up making this taller. You might want to go a little bit shorter because, you know, the height of my 2 main boards are 5.5 inches tall. You might want to go down to maybe 4 inches tall. But I wanted to make taller in case I had bigger things to put in my wheelbarrow. I have lots of room. Okay, so that was just the main thing and why I chose that height. And plus, I didn't have to cut down that, you know, 2 Dollar Tree boards any more than just down one side. All right, so now I'm taking antique wax mixed with water and I'm going to stain every piece. And then once I'm done staining outside, I go back out to sanding once again. Sanding is my friend today. Once I'm done sanding everything, it's not my friend today, but you know, you get the drift and I won't bore you with any more sanding. But I want it to look all distressed. And you could paint your wheelbarrow any color you want. I almost went white, but then I thought I'm just going to do stain because then I can go in with any colors I want inside. So now what we're doing here is I just want to take a look-see before we actually get started assembling. So I have my paint sticks that would be on the bottom and my 2 main boards that would be the front and the back. Okay, so now we're going to take those 2 main boards off and we're going to look at it from the underside view. Okay, so I have the 2 short little legs that are about 3 inches. They're going to go 1 on each end here. I want to show you how the wheel assembly is going to work. So 1 on each end, just like this. And then we're going to take those 2 long boards and I've marked them here at about, I think like, let me measure here, 4.5 inches. And where I've marked them, that mark is going to go right at the end of those paint sticks on the right side. Okay, so here we'll go right here. Okay, and it's going to touch, the left end is going to touch, and it's going to be about 5 inches extended. It's going to touch that short main board, that short 3-inch board, and come in at a diagonal to that second board in on each side. I'll show you what that looks like, making sure this lines up there. And you can go however far out you want your boards to be, but that's what I did. So 4 inches is sticking out the front, 4.5 inches, 5 inches sticking out the back, and it's going to kind of look like that. And then we're going to do the same on the other side, but the opposite. And then, of course, the wheel will go in the center at the front on the right side. Okay, that's what it's going to look like on the bottom. I wanted you to get a look-see. Here's the wheel. So what I've done is I've marked the wheel in the center here, so you can see my line right there. Okay, and this the ends of these two long boards are going to mark at this line here, which is about 3/4 inches away. But the dowel is going to come through the center mark of that circle. Is that understandable? So here comes my dowel. It's going to go at that center mark. That's kind of how I did it. So again, just wanted you to get a look-see from the bottom edge because I thought it would be easier to assemble. And my husband is going to just kind of use his drill press to drill the holes. Now, if you don't want to mess with drilling a hole, you could just kind of take these two inner corners here, sand them off flat, and then wood glue them to your wheel, because the other end, the left side, the way they splay out and they're connected to those two short 3-inch legs, it's going to hold those longer sticks at the right side right against that wheel really tight, so wood glue should work perfectly. Okay, so hopefully that's understandable. Now let's start assembling. I am now on the bottom. I'm just kind of laying my two boards here. You can see how wobbly it is. And I'm gluing my 5 paint sticks across the bottom. All right, and they're probably about 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch apart. And then I'm going to use some tiny little, these are like, 3.5 inch nails, I think they are. And I'm just going to do 2 nails on each end of the paint stick. So it's going to be nice and, you know, sturdy in there, nice and stable. I didn't want to just rely on wood glue because it's such a thin area, but I didn't want to just rely on the nail either. I wanted a combination of both, but whatever you're comfortable with, if you just want to nail it in, you go with it. It's just decoration, not really meant to be used, obviously. So, you know, just make sure it holds up to what you want to put inside of it. Okay? All right, finishing up the nails here, and then I'll give you a good look at it. Plus, the nails give it a little bit of a rustic look, don't you think? So here's our nails going across here, of course, like you see. And then we're going to come in and do one side with 4 paint sticks. Now, if you wanted to make this shorter, you could go with 3 paint sticks. I almost went shorter. Part of me thinks maybe I should have went just 3 paint sticks high, but I, like I said, ended up going 4 in case I wanted to, you know, put something bigger inside or needed more room or whatever. But doing the same thing as the bottom, gluing first, and then I'll come in with the nails. I'm only doing one side right now, and then we're going to tackle underneath the bottom with the legs and the wheel assembly and all that, because if I put the paint sticks on the other side, it's going to be too hard for me to get in with my hammer to hammer down on that bottom to get our stuff in place. Okay, so now I'm gluing in the little 3-inch legs. Now when I put this down here, I'm not all the way, I'm to the end of the paint stick. I'm going to have an arrow here for you. I'm there, not all the way to the edge where the side paint stick joins the bottom paint stick. I'm just at the edge of the bottom paint stick, only you'll see it better over here. I'm just right at that edge because, you know, we don't have the side paint stick there yet. And now what I've got is I already hammered 2 nails in those feet, and I've pre-nailed in some holes to hold our long boards for our wheel assembly. And they're nailed in enough where they're kind of sticking out the bottom a little bit, so they'll kind of act like tacks when I go to put this in. I'm sorry I didn't show you the wheel assembly first, but I'll come back to it and show you it, you know, in a minute. So what I'm doing, adding a little glue here right over those nailed areas, and then I'm going to split apart at one end into that triangle form and kind of push it into my nails that are sticking out. Is that understandable? Pull it over to the other side and push it in. Get that in there. And then I can flip it over. You can see what it's looking like. I can flip it over and then hammer in the nails from this side. I'm going to put a piece of wood under it first, though, to give me a little stability to try and hammer here and get those in there. I don't care that, you know, I've got, you know, 4 nails. That's all going to get hidden anyway. So I want as many nails as it makes assembly. All right, now I'm going to come into the other side and go ahead and put my paint sticks on that side. Again, the same thing, just going to go ahead and glue those on there and then nail them in on the side, of course. 2 nails on each end of each paint stick. Okay, and once this is done, we're going to go into showing you the wheel assembly, because I didn't show you like putting it together, but it's pretty explanatory of how it goes together. But, you know, so sorry, this is like after the fact. I thought I was filming it, apparently not. So again, in review, the front end of my little sticks that hold the wheel are out 4.5 inches, okay, from the edge of the wheelbarrow. And then in the back, they're coming out, remember, right at that edge. And then in the back, they're coming out about 5.5 inches from that edge, okay, right here from that edge. The wheel does turn Okay, it's on this dowel here. Nothing is glued in here. Nothing is glued, okay? The dowel measures about 2.5 inches, and my husband and I thought it looked cute, kind of decorative, sticking out a little bit from each side, but you can make it flush. Again, if you don't want to mess with the dowel, or drilling a hole, you can just sand those inner points off and glue them together. But the way this legs go in a V shape, that V shape at the end pushes that front edge together, so it didn't even need glue. I can't even move this dowel. So the way my husband drill pressed it through is he put a stick in through here that measured about the 5.25 inch length. He kind of stuck a stick in there, and then he used a clamp at the front to clamp it together, and then he was able to drill straight through all the pieces, okay? I didn't watch it. He explained it to me. That's how it's done. So hopefully this is understandable. But again, just glue it together. You don't have to mess with the dowel. Now that little spot where I filled in with wood glue there, I just turned it so it's covered by the, sticks of the wheel assembly. So here's what it looks like. 2 more things I did was 2 nails right there to the leg to give those long wheel pieces more stability, helps keep both of those stable, nothing's wobbling. All right, I think it looks really cute. So next thing I'm going to do is add in some Excelsior here. I got this for like $1 at a garage sale. You can get Excelsior anywhere. But first, so I don't have to use up so much, I'm just going to crinkle up some brown paper down in the bottom. All right, and then, of course, spread out some Excelsior in there. And then I'll flip it to each side and add just a little bit kind of sticking out the holes down at the bottom to cover up any of that paper because, I don't want that seen. Again, you might like it with the 3 paint sticks high versus 4. I still keep thinking I should have done 3, but I'm going with 4. There's nothing I can do about it now. So you might want to adjust your measurements there. Was this the 3rd or 4th time I told you? You might want to do that. Anywho, once the Excelsior's in there, that makes this project complete. It's pumpkin time. Let's roll into project number 5. For this project, I'm using these 3 fabrics. Now, all of these were thrifted at garage sales at one time or another. I thought they looked pretty together. And for my circle, I just grabbed a round lid, and it measures about 12.5 inches in diameter. Now, the top 2 plain fabrics, I just traced the lid as it is. And then the sweater fabric, which is really a blanket that I found, I traced that about 1 inch bigger all the way around, which of course is about 13.5 inches. Here, everything is cut off and ready to go. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm using some fishing line here. I like to use fishing line because it does not break and I stuff my pumpkins quite tightly. Now, when I make my initial knots at one end of the fishing line, I do about 4 or 5 knots because fishing line is slick, right? And then I pull it really tight. So I'm going to start from the front to the back, inserting my needle and fishing line, pulling it all the way to the knot. Then I'm going to come from the back to the front about 1/2 inch apart. I'm going to pull it all the way through, and then I'm going to start pleating about 1/2 inch apart, front to back, pleating the fabric onto my needle. If you need a little bit slower on how to just kind of do this basic like running or gather stitch, whatever way you want to call it, I'll have a link to my blog in the description box. It'll have that video on it for you. It's fairly easy, but we have new sewers, right? So you might want to learn how to do it, but basically, it's just kind of pleating the fabric on the needle, and you can pleat as many times as you want and then pull, your needle through the fabric and continue that process all the way around till you come right close to your little knot on the fishing line where you started. So here I am, I'm like right close to the knot on the left, needle on the right here. I'll pull my, needle all the way through, of course. And then what I'm going to do is just pull the knot out, okay? And so then you'll have your line that your needle is on and your line that the knot's on. Nice long line there, okay? And just let that sit for a while. I'm going to go ahead and cut my needle off because I'm done with that for now. And then you're going to take and stuff your pumpkin as full as you want to stuff it. And you kind of pull your, as you're stuffing it, pull both your, threads at the same time to, see if you want more stuffing, that kind of thing. And then go ahead and you can close your pumpkin up. Now, if you don't want to use fishing line, you can use like, a heavy duty thread or an upholstery thread or crochet thread or something like that. And you just pull your two pieces of whatever you're closing your pumpkin with. You pull it as tight as leaving your opening big enough for whatever you're using for your stem, okay? Like if you're using a cinnamon stick or you're using a big stick from the backyard, whatever diameter of your stem is, that's how closed you pull your fishing line, string, thread, whatever you decide to close your pumpkin with. Now I'm bringing in some crochet thread here. I'm using that same kind of long needle from what we just used on our fishing line. It has a large eye opening, and I'm coming through the center of the pumpkin all the way down to the bottom, staying in the center, and I'm going to pull that crochet thread all the way through. Okay, and again, you could use fishing line here, you can use the crochet thread, you could use yarn, whatever you want. All right, and there's a couple of ways to do this. So you can see how I'm wrapping it around the pumpkin, and then I come back through the center, or you can do one section at a time, okay? Either way, so the first time I wrapped all the way around and back up through the center, pull it tight, and now I'm doing one section at a time to show you this. I'm just coming back around the outside, through the bottom, up through the center of the pumpkin. Then I'll go around the outside again, back up through the bottom, up through the center of the pumpkin. See, now we're doing one section at a time. Again, around the outside, up through the bottom, through the center of the pumpkin. Okay, and you just continue this process for as many segments as you want. I usually go odd number, around 5, and then when I'm done, I'll just take my needle and thread and I'll just kind of pull it through some of that excess fabric in the center, pull it through a couple of times, and then knot it off and then cut off the excess. Okay. All right, so now I've got some thick twine. This is larger diameter twine you can get at Walmart. I am cutting 14 pieces, okay? And I just did a big long chunk. I'm going to say they're probably at least 12 to 14 inches long. You can make them as long as you want them. They end up a little longer than I want, and I cut it off, and that's fine. I set 2 pieces over to the side, and I'm going to gather up the other 12 pieces, okay? And I'm going to make them all even at one end. Okay, and then about 2 inches down from one end, I'm taking one of the pieces I set to the side and I'm going to wrap it around the end and glue it down. Okay, and then once that's set, I'm going to start braiding the, twine that's hanging down, and I make 3 sections of 4 pieces of twine a piece, and I braid all the way down to probably maybe, 5 inches or so. And then I'm going to take the last piece of twine here. I didn't know why I didn't show it on the first part, but here's the second one. And you can see I'm just wrapping it around and kind of gluing it in section until I get as, thick of a wrap as I want. And then I'll cut off the excess. All right, and then I'm going to use just a little Dollar Tree clamp here to hold that in place so I can work on something else while that glue's setting up. It only takes about a minute, but it's an extra hand to help me out. So now I'm back at the top where we originally started, and I want to take each of those pieces of twine and just unravel them and let them look all frayed and everything. And I love how the stem turns out. I actually think it would be really cute. Those of you that like Halloween, it would make a really cute kind of Halloween stem, but this is a fall stem today. And then I'm pressing it all out. And now I'm taking a piece, just a long chunk of 18 gauge wire you get from Walmart. I was about ready to say Dollar Tree. And I'm just running that piece of wire through the braided area. And there's going to be a nice excess coming out that bottom that we unraveled. And I don't cut that excess off. Here, I'll get back here on camera. Here we go. I just start bending it back and forth. And I leave it there. It's probably about 2 inches or so of wrapped wire, just kind of back and forth like this, because what that's going to do is give me something to glue into the center of our pumpkin with. Is that understandable? Now I'll go ahead and clip off the excess, and I'll just add a bunch of glue around the top fabric of the pumpkin and on that little wire stem we made, so to speak, and then I'll plop that right down into our pumpkin here. And it'll kind of spread out, our little frazzled ends there, super cute. And then we're going to do the same thing at the other side. Of course, take off your clamp. I'm going to cut these down a little bit to about probably 1.5 inches or so. And then I'll start unraveling these as well so it matches the other side. Yes, I just love how this turned out. And unraveling, I just think gives it a little more personality. You don't have to unravel, but I like the way it looks. And then once all that is unraveled, we're just going to kind of shape our stem. And that makes this pumpkin complete. Let's dive into another pumpkin for project number 6. So on this pumpkin, I've already sewn it, I've already stuffed it. We did that on the first one, so we know how to do that. Let's move on. And now I'm starting with my crochet string through the top of the pumpkin, down through the middle, and coming out the bottom. We're going to do a section at a time here. I'm going to wrap it around once, and then come back through the center, and then out through the bottom again. I wanted to show you this way how just doing it all the way around like this, one section at a time. Wrap it around, through the center, down through the bottom. Now, when you come out through the bottom, try not to have your thread come out the same hole every time, especially if you have thin fabric. I don't have mine. I come out in the general vicinity, but not, out the same hole. That way it doesn't rip and make your hole bigger or something if you're trying to pull your sections tight, that kind of thing. And then again, I just go through some edges of fabric there and I knot it off when my sections are done. And then you can kind of move your thread around as you need to. Okay, now for this one, I'm going to bring in, I wasn't sure here, I've got like pumpkin, a couple of wood leaves. I end up using a wood leaf and a cinnamon stick that I cut down to about 4 inches. I'm going to pop that in the center. And then this is going to be just a real easy pumpkin, adding some glue and some moss around it. Moss and stuff helps kind of hide all that extra excess fabric at the top, right? And then I'm just kind of using some ink here and inking up one leaf. I just wanted to show some real easy, simple ways to decorate pumpkins. We've probably all seen it, but there you go. And I pop that leaf in there to the side of a cinnamon stick. I'm using some of that big twine again we just used on our first pumpkin, made it into a bow. I'm going to pop that down there next to the bottom of the cinnamon stick, and I'm going to add a couple of beads, one on each end. Of course, tie a knot at the end of each bead because we don't want our bead to fall off. All right, so that'll make this pumpkin complete. It's time for our last stuffed pumpkin, project number 7. Now this pumpkin, as you can see, it's sewn, it's stuffed, and I have the sections in it. So each pumpkin we moved a little bit of a step ahead so you didn't have to watch the same process 3 times. And I've got a little bit bigger hole here, and I'm going to use this I found at a garage sale. It was $1, and I'm just going to add this into the top. It doesn't quite fit all the way in. I mean, I'm shoving it in, but it's okay because I'm going to add some moss around the top. I just get it in till it's straight, and then I add my moss to cover up everything in there and cover up all the excess sweater around the top. And then this is like a vintage piece of lace. You can see the staining on it. I just tie it into like a little knot, and I'm going to glue that to that little thing there. All of a sudden, I can't remember what those are. It'll come to me later when I'm not trying to think about it. And I've got just like some burgundy plaid ribbon tied in a bow. Glued that at the base there as well. And then I'm adding some twine to the center of some buttons, about 4 buttons I think I use here. And I'm going to take 2 buttons and I'm going to glue onto the tails of that vintage lace there, just because I thought it'd be fun. And then I'm making a twine bow out of that thicker twine we've been using. I'm adding some big wood beads here. I got these wood bead garland at Hobby Lobby last year. Of course, I'll tie a knot at the end of the twine there to let those beads stay on there and kind of smush the ends. And I'm leaving the tails a little bit longer here. And then I'm going to add some white pip berries right on top of that ribbon, and then go ahead and glue my twine bow over the pip berries. And then I'm going to cover that up with a little decorative button. These buttons are decorative from scrapbooking, and I love it because the writing and stuff on it. Put that on there, ink up the ribbon a little bit, and that makes this rustic vintage looking pumpkin complete. let's prepare to make project number 8. This project, I'm bringing in some salvage wood boards and I'm going to cut them down. I'm going to make an extra long cutting board. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to need 3 boards total for the cutting board. I'm going to use this one for my center, and I'm going to actually cut this down to 25 inches because this board is going to have the handle on it, okay? And then I'm going to cut the other 2 boards down to 20 inches, both of those at 20 inches. And then this little trim board on the side, I'm just going to cut it down. I don't know how long they were. You'll see I'm just going to cut 2 pieces for each side of the board. Now, if you don't want to do a cutting board and make one, you can get one at Hobby Lobby. Mine's going to be like this shape. It's just going to be a little wider and a little bit longer, but you can totally do a pre-made board. And then here I'll show you, see, then I'm going to cut 2 pieces to fit like here and here onto the one I'm making. So that's all I'm doing, and that's optional if you don't want to. So here I'm using this cutting board actually, and I'm just tracing the handle because I like the shape of it, and I'm going to cut that out with my jigsaw here. So I'll just let you see a little bit of that action. And of course today we'll see Bella and Boston hovering around in the crafting area, so you might see tails wagging or a little bit of feet laying or a little bit of sleeping or whatever, but it's real life, as I always say. This is not a professional video. So I'll get the rest of this handle cut out, and then we'll go to cut out the other boards at the lengths that we need. So again, that's why this board was a little bit longer to offset for the length of the handle. So these boards I'm cutting down to 20 inches, right? So that middle board essentially being 25 inches makes my handle about 5 inches long. All right, I'm just kind of straightening out this board because it was a little bit crooked. And these boards, I think I got at Habitat for Humanity. They have just like a scrap wood shed, and I just went and picked out some fun salvage wood boards, 25 cents a foot. And they're really liberal with that. They'll look at an 8-foot board and go, $1, you know, when it should have been $2. They're just really nice about it. So cutting these off. Now, one of the boards, I'll come back to it. It broke when I cut it, so we're going to have to wood glue it together. So I'm cutting this little trim board down to the size I need for this. And I think they're probably about 8 inches or so long. I love the color and the rustic of it. Here's the one board that kind of broke, because salvage wood board, you know, they got wrinkles and crinkles and all that stuff. I'm just going to wood glue it together. It's not going to be any problem there. And then I will clamp it, and I'll let that sit for a few minutes as I move on to the other boards. And, you know, we'll get them all sanded up and stuff like that. So just doing a little clamping here. Let it set aside for at least 10 minutes, but a half hour is even better. All right, and then here I am sanding the rest of the boards. I want them all nice and, you know, smooth. I don't want any splinters or anything like that when I handle it. It will be decoration, of course, but I still want it to be nice and smooth. Of course, once everything's done and all sanded, the other board that we had, you know, clamped together is ready to go. Now I'm going to go ahead and glue and clamp these 3 boards together. Now, when I clamp them, I do that off camera, but I'll give you a shot of how it looks because we had to sort of clamp it a little bit creatively, you know, so that everything would stay together properly. I'll show you what that means here in just a second. And here is my clamping job. So we needed the boards to, of course, stay together from end to end, from top to bottom. But when we did that, then the 2 end pieces kept wanting to, you know, pop up. So we have a couple pieces of, you know, little salvage wood boards there, and we've got those clamped down to hold those 2 boards down into position. I let that set like 2 hours. So here's my board ready to go. I'm going to be doing some stenciling, and I cut it out with my electronic cutter. I like to cut it out in vinyl because vinyl sticks really well onto my projects, and then I don't get like maybe 1% bleeding around the edges, whereas you actually use stencil material to make a stencil, I tend to get bleeding around it. So I will have a free printable for you. If you look in the upper left corner, this is what it's going to look like. The top one is the quote in its entirety, but if you want it as big as mine, which is about 13 inches, you're going to have to resize it. Underneath that, where the pumpkin and the farms and the little pumpkin is separated, that is the actual size, but you would have to kind of piece it together to make your 13 inches across. So I kind of gave you 2 options there, okay? So I hope that's understandable. And then the other 2 just go in with what we're stenciling today, and you'll see that in a minute. So I'm going to use Debbie's Design Diary Little Black Dress paint, just a black paint. My stencil brush, I like to dip it in the paint, wipe off the excess so it looks like there's really no paint on your brush at all. And then I come in and I do the up and down pouncing motion. And I would do a light coat all the way across, and then I'll come back through and do another coat if I want, okay? It's best to do like a light coat, kind of let it dry, and then come back in and do another coat. Again, less bleeding that way. Now, when I do this, there are some areas I'm not fully stenciling in. That way it just looks rustic, and I don't have to try and sand it to make it look rustic. It just kind of does the job for me. So I do a couple of coats, leaving some spaces open. And then for the pumpkin, I wanted to come in with Dixie Belle chalk paint here in the orange, and I wanted to come in with a little bit of black first and then orange over it, because I didn't want to just do orange. I thought it would be too bright. And in the end, even though it's not very orange at all, you just really couldn't see it. And I had peeled the stencil off. You can see me peeling it off here, and I'm looking at it going, I don't like that. I should have just went with black, because I thought, should I just do the pumpkin in black? And of course, here's what that looks like. You can see it. Yeah, I could have just done vibrant orange, but I was trying to make this look kind of rustic, you know, and like faded, and so I thought kind of a black and orange mixture. Nope, didn't like it. So I actually got the stencil back on there. How I did it, I don't know, in place, and put black right over the top. This was like miracle right here, and look, it looks fabulous. All right, so now the other two stencils, I'm putting them on these skinnier trim boards. I cut these, and I'm doing this so that it kind of looks like the top of a crate with a lid, okay? And crates usually have numbers and stuff like that, so I'm putting it on sideways on, you know, one of our little trim boards. And then this one here, I'm just going to kind of put where I want it on there, because obviously not all of it's going to be seen. As I'm doing this, if you all don't know, whenever I do vinyl, Bella loves the sticky. So I have to, I'm trying to move it around, and she's trying to follow me to get to the sticky. It's hilarious. So I end up cutting her a little piece, and then you'll see her pick it up in her mouth. She'll jump off, come back up for some more. I don't know why she loves the sticky of the transfer paper and the vinyl. So here I am. Look, she's trying to so get to me. I got some sticky there. She'll pick it up, trying to get her out of my way so I can continue crafting. I've even tried to be really quiet, peeling it off slowly, and it's like she can smell it. It's crazy. So I'm getting this, she's still following me around. Look, she's still trying to get to my vinyl here. It's just crazy. She's so funny. So I placed the stencil on where I wanted it. I'll give her a little bit more sticky here so I can finish. I left it in for you guys. I know some of you say, show us more cat. Some of you say, don't show any more cat. Well, we're going to show some more cats here. Get the rest of this off, and then I'll go ahead and stencil these. And like I said, you can see I just kind of placed it in the middle, so it kind of said fall stuff if you knew what we were doing, obviously, and you do, or it just kind of looked like some random phrase on the top of a crate, some kind of address or something weird like that. Stenciling it again with the, black paint here, and then I'll peel it off, and it looks really cool, I think. And again, I stenciled it really light in some areas so that it looks a little bit worn and distressed as usual, and I think it looks great. I love the numbers half hanging off. I love the letters over here, the words, only part of it on there, but of course on the stencil you have the full words and the full date, or I call it a date because usually they date when the crate's going out or something like that, even though it doesn't really look like a month, day, and year. I just picked some random numbers, but there you go. All right, Bella's coming in for a little pet. Now I'm going to use some Gorilla wood glue and get these on. And then I will clamp them down off camera, because I still, want to clamp them a little bit. Get them in place just like 10 minutes, just so it's got a nice tack, because then I'll come in with some screws, some rusty screws that I found off some other wood piece or something like that. And I'm going to go ahead and, screw these down into the cutting board down below. All right, so get both of these into place. I love this one on the left because it's kind of like a curved board too. It's kind of crookedy a little bit, but it just gives it fun. I love the knot holes in it. Once those are done, I've got some rusty screws here, and I'm just going to put them in kind of a triangular fashion, top, bottom, and into the center on, the outer side of each board. And I pre-drilled some holes so it'll be a little bit easier to get these screws in. I wanted them to be a little bit more visible. They're kind of like blend in, but I love that they were rusty. I mean, I could have used some like bright silver or something like that, but that wouldn't work. See, they look really nice here. And when I screwed them in, I had to make sure I wasn't, I had them in an area I wasn't screwing into a crack in the board or anything like that. And now I'm using a really, really large drill bit, and I'm going to drill a hole into the handle here, of course. Oh, that wood was hard. And then before I add any rope to it, I'm taking some of that black paint mixed with water and a fan brush, and I'm just adding some splatters to it. It's very muted. You don't like see it really stand out, but it just adds that little bit of texture and gives a little bit more worn to the cutting board itself. And then instead of twine, I had some of this jute rope. I got it at Walmart a long time ago. It was like $4 or something like that. I'm going to use it. Of course, if you have twine, use twine, but I wanted it to look a little more ropey. I'm going to add that to the hole in the handle, and that makes this project complete. This DIY is amazing and a bit corny. Let's move into project number 9. For this project, I'm using some fabric from Hobby Lobby, this green and of course this yellowy orange plaid, and then this other one. Now this back one I'm going to do off camera because it's going to be the same thing as I'm showing you on camera, and they were all 40% off because they were considered fall fabrics. Now I'll have a free pattern for you below in my description box, of course. We're going to make some cute kind of rustic farmhouse corn. These are the 2 pieces you're going to need. You're going to cut 2 from the corn on the left and 4 from the leaf on the right. So of course I cut everything off on camera, and I opted to use some batting. You can buy it in a bag or by the yard at Walmart. I cut 1 piece for each of the leaves and 2 pieces for the corn. Now forgive this little pile of batting at the top, but when I got it out and I was cutting on it, little Boston decided to take a nap, and she's too cute to, take her off the table. So we'll let her sleep in the pile of batting up above us, and we will work down below. We will make the adjustment. If you're a gluer and you use batting, you're going to want to glue each piece of batting to each piece of fabric. Then whether or not you use batting, then you want to glue the corn together. So you're going to go around the edge and then right down on one side at the bottom, leave like a 3-finger opening, and then put those together. If you're a sewer, you're going to do the same thing. Go all the way around, leave about a 3-finger opening, right? Then once that's sewn or glued together, you're going to stuff it and then close it if you're a gluer, or close it if you're a sewer. If you're a gluer, if you use the batting or don't use the batting, glue your 2 pieces of fabric with or without the batting together on both leaves. If you're a sewer, go ahead and sew around the perimeter of each leaf. I'm calling it a leaf. I guess it's a corn husk, isn't it? All right, so here I am just kind of showing you a little bit. I'm going around our husk and sewing around the perimeter. And I don't care if you're new to my channel, if the batting peeks out around the edges or anything like that. That's what gives it some personality. And then here I am coming around with the corn, and I'm going to sew it all the way down until I get near the bottom, and again leave a 2-3 inch opening there, and then I will stuff it off camera, and then I will sew that opening close. And here it is all stuffed. Everything's sewn together. Got my leaves. Now let's move on to, I want to call it leaves. We're going with it. What you want to do, gluer or sewer. I'm a sewer, but I'm going to still glue this part on, as we want to put our leaves down at the bottom of our corn. So kind of wrap it half onto your corn. I made the pattern so each leaf would wrap halfway around the corn, and just down at the bottom about 3 inches, and then glue it all together. So here I'm kind of gluing one side around the bottom of the corn, and you're at the pointy end of the corn, and then take the other one, wrap it around the leaf and the corn, and then glue it down together like that. So you've got that little wrap, little overlap at the bottom like this. Okay, now I like to sew, so I'm just going to add some stitches right down at the bottom. It's just decorative. You do not have to do this. So of course, this is what that looks like. See, just a little decorative stitch, just some fun. Kind of bend your leaves down, husks, leaves. You could actually like iron them down so they stay kind of, folded over. And now I'm going to use some Distress Oxide ink. This is Fossilized Amber, and then this is Vintage Photo. Our fabric looks a little flat. Let's add some dimension. So basically, I'm just taking a little sponge dauber. It fits on my finger, and I'm just rubbing like the vintage photo ink all along on the leaves around the point and just kind of giving it a little bit of shading, just as if you were painting and adding some shading, okay? And I'm going to come in the same thing with that fossilized amber. It's kind of like an orangish yellow, and I'm just kind of shading around the corn, like I said, giving it some dimension. You can skip this part if you want to. You don't have to do it. Now, I've printed onto some muslin fabric. You could stamp on it too. Some Michael's clickable stamps would be cute. I've cut a piece of batting and a piece of muslin for the back, and I'm going to sew around it. You, of course, could glue around if you're a gluer, and here is my sewing. I don't care that my word is crooked or anything like that. It gives it fun. And I'm just inking around the word, leaving the center of the word not inked, so it kind of adds a halo to it, inking the back to finish it off, set that aside. And I'm going to use some of this creepy cloth from Dollar Tree. You don't have to do it, but we need to make that stringy stuff that's in the center. And I'm actually going to do a combination of this creepy cloth and some sisal. And like you could use one or the other or both. Like I said, I'm going to use both, and I'm just kind of gluing in that creepy cloth down along the bottom of the corn, you know, onto our husks a little bit. Here's some of that sisal. The sisal looks a lot more like the stringy stuff, but I wanted just a little bit more bulk in there, or not bulk, but dimension using that creepy cloth. And so I'm adding sisal in down around kind of the bottom of that corn there and gluing it in. And then I'll bring up our little husks a little bit more and glue it a little bit more up onto the corn so you don't see any of the glue spots. And now I've got a little kind of orange plaid ribbon here. You get this ribbon at Hobby Lobby, and I'm just going to add it to the front of our tag here a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and glue the tag down up onto the corn a little bit higher there, and then I'm just adding a safety pin to attach it all together. This is done. I'll go ahead and bring in the other corn I made off camera. I made them together as a pair, but you could make a trio, a quadruple, I don't know, whatever you want. They are super cute and would so be cute in your farmhouse fall decor. Here it is, Autumn Wishes, and that makes this project complete. This is it, project number 10. For this project, we're making some cute farmhouse pumpkin coasters. Link to my blog again. We'll have this free pattern. It's got the pumpkin, the leaf, and the stem on it. You can glue this if you're a gluer, but do not use hot glue because these are coasters, right? We're going to set our hot mug and coffee on them, and so you want a nice fabric glue. I would suggest the fabric glue like I normally use, Beacon Fabri-Tac glue would work great. You can use batting, or I had this quilted fabric from Joann's. I decided to use this because I like the color a little bit more, so I'm using that for my center and make it a little bit more fluffy but not too fluffy. So I cut one out for the main pumpkin with 2 pieces of fabric, and then I've got my 2 leaves in fabric and another of that quilted for that, and then of course my stem fabric and a piece for that. So Beacon Fabri-Tac glue is going to work wonderful for this. I've had pants with patches on that I've run through the dryer, hot heat dryer for years, and those patches still hold. Beacon Fabri-Tac glue, if you're a gluer and gluing this together, will hold up to the heat of your mug, okay? So what you're going to do is sandwich your batting or quilted fabric or whatever in between each of your 2 pieces of fabric, leaving the edges all hang out. So do that in between all your pieces, just like this. Now, once you've sewn or glued your stem together, do that first. You could just lay it in like I'm doing here, but it's going to just add a little bit of a bump. So what I'm going to do before I sew or put this in is I'm going to mark around the bottom part of the stem, and I'm going to cut that out of the material I'm using in the center of the 2 pieces of fabric. And that way I can lay that stem in there and give us a nice flat look across the top, okay? Now, of course, I'm going to sew my stem first and then set it inside and finish on with the pumpkin. Now, if you want to do some hand stitching, again, some crochet thread here. This is like a size 10 crochet thread. It's really thin. You could elect to do that. I am going to use this later to kind of work some segments on the pumpkin, but you could stitch around your stem and then put this together and stitch around the outside. Like I said, I'm going to do some here. You could also stitch on the leaf if you wanted to do that. Make your little veins in your leaf, however you want to do it. But I'm going to come in and sew all my pieces together, of course, as I usually do. Now, if you're an experienced sewer and you don't want all your edges and stuff hanging out, you don't want it to look as rustic as it is, you can do, you know, right sides together and make it pretty and then flip it right side out, you know, sew it on the wrong side, flip it right side out, that kind of thing. You know, do how you want to do it, but I find it easier, quicker, and it looks just as cute to leave the edges all hanging out. So I sewed the leaf, I sewed the stem, and then I put the stem inside the pumpkin in that little area we cut out in that center quilted piece of fabric. And now I'm sewing around the pumpkin, and of course I'll sew right up over the stem to make sure that that is sewn into that ensemble, of course. And this fabric, this plaid fabric, I got at Jubilee Fabrics. All right, this is what that looks like. Now you can see I sewed it with a thread that you don't really see a whole lot. I'm like, that's not good enough. So I went back in with this darker brown thread, and now it shines up a little more. Look at the left versus the right. So I'm going to do that on all my pumpkins, even though I've already sewed them. I don't care if there's double stitching in two different colors. I just think that adds to the look. So now I'm bringing in my crochet thread. Off camera, I did veins with the crochet thread on the leaf to give it some fun, and I didn't like how it looked, so I pulled all of that crochet thread out, and I'm going to leave my leaf just plain. But you can do how you want to do it. But I am going to use crochet thread to make, you know, our segments on our pumpkin. Now this is just some like a tracing, like a chalk. I can't remember if I got it on eBay or Walmart. Walmart has it too, but it's nice because it's got, you know, an eraser on one end, and I'm just going to use it to mark. It's like a marking chalk or pen. Mark on my fabric where I want to make my little stitches to make my segments, and then I can erase it when I'm done. So again, Walmart has it, and like I said, I think I got mine off eBay because I was already ordering something else, so I just ordered it. And I'm going to start from the front to the back, and I don't care that my knot is there because that's going to get hidden by our leaf. And I'm just going to make some little straight stitches all the way down. In fact, I'm just going to pleat a few stitches at a time onto this kind of long upholstery needle and pull it all the way through. And I'm just going to go down and pleat, but I'm going to show you a couple of little tricks to kind of help hide our thread on the back side because we want it to look nice on the back side. But you can see what the stitchers are doing. I don't care if some of the stitches get a little wonky or anything like that. Like I always say, it just adds to the look. So once I get down to the bottom, I'm going to pull that last stitch. You can see there what it looks like again, to the back side. One more stitch here to the back side. And then we're going to look up here on the back. Now, we want to go from there across, and we don't want to see our thread like this. We want to hide it, okay? I'll bring this up a little bit closer. So what I'm doing is just going right through underneath. You can see on the front side, you don't see that needle. I'm staying underneath between the fabric and that layer of fabric on the back side, and I'm just making one long stitch from one side to the other. And you just, when you pull it through, just make sure you're not going through the front, okay, just like that. And then come back through and start making some more stitches on your next segment here. And you can make as many segments as you want, but the way I made the pattern, really, you're only going to have 3 segments. So, haha. Finish that up. I'll do a few more stitches here, and then I'm just going to bring it across the top here and, you know, end where I started with that knot. Again, that's going to be hidden. I'm just going to pull right up underneath that knot there. Like I said, it's going to be hidden. All right. Now our leaf, we're going to kind of do the same thing we did on the back, and I'll bring it up closer, but I'm going to fold my leaf in half, figure out where I want it. I'm probably about a 1/2 inch from that left edge. Fold it in half and hold it there onto our pumpkin. All right. And I'm going to bring my needle right through the back of that fabric in between the batting and that fabric, okay? So you don't see it on the front here. See, we don't see it. We're just on the back side of that leaf there. And we're going to pull it all the way through, one big long stitch, all right? And then we're going to come, get it into position, hold your leaf back, and we're going to come right back through here into the fabric. We're going to stay on that top fabric. the top fabric, just like we did on the leaf. You're not coming through the back side. All right, stay on that top layer of fabric, one long stitch, pull it through. All right, nice and tight, and then you're going to do the same thing again. We're going to do this twice here. Making sure I don't come through the front, just staying on the back side of that leaf. Pull it all the way through, and then we're going to come finish it up. One more big stitch staying on the front of that pumpkin there underneath, and then we're just going to tie a little knot through one of the little stitches we made on the pumpkin there. Again, it's not going to get seen. Tie it off, a little knot here, cut off the excess, and I'm going to add a little Beacon Fabri-Tac glue here just to glue that knot down. Again, Beacon Fabri-Tac glue will work fine. All right, and then I'm erasing my little lines. And that makes this project complete. So I hope you enjoyed taking a look back at 10 of my favorite fall crafts from last year. Leave me a comment down below and let me know which project that you didn't get to make last year that you're hoping you get done this year, because if you start right now, you've got plenty of time before the season ends. Please give this video a thumbs up, and if you walked in here for the first time, you're just checking things out, you're digging what you saw, make sure before you click off, you hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss out on another video from me. Now, before I go, I'm going to leave you with one final thought. Trusting Jesus takes great faith. We live in a day and time where we haven't seen Jesus. We didn't get to see his miracles or walk beside him and talk to him, so it's by faith that we must trust him to do all things. Trusting in something other than ourselves takes great courage, and having courage in God allows us to face any difficult situation with slingshot in hand, knowing that he will see us through. Simply put, we aren't alone in our struggles. Our faith gives us confidence to have strength in God's presence, power, and promises. In the Bible, the book of Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. In the book of Mark chapter 5, we read about a woman, and she had womanly health issues of bleeding for many years. She was tired, exhausted, unwell. Jewish law labeled her unclean, and no one would touch her. She was outcast. She was willing to give everything she had to find wholeness and healing, but no one was her savior until she heard about Jesus. Even though she had never spoken with him, she had only heard of him. She had no doubt in him. She trusted him, and she had great faith in him. The book of Ephesians chapter 3, verse 12, in him and through faith in him, we may approach God with freedom and confidence. In this story, we have the opportunity to understand how faith, trust, and courage through action in God can change our circumstances. This woman was willing to risk her life, defying every obstacle as she moved through a packed crowd in order to stop the bleeding. Without any doubts, her heart knew that if she just touched one tiny piece of Jesus' cloak, not touching Jesus, just a piece of his clothing, she would be well. Her trust was so wrapped in faith, and it rewarded her belief because she earnestly sought after Jesus for healing. And what did Jesus do about her actions? After she fell to his feet and confessed what she'd done, instead of condemning her, his compassion took time to acknowledge her. He called her daughter, publicly claiming her as his own. He knew without a doubt that she knew she would be healed. That's why when he spoke to her, he said in Mark chapter 5, verse 34, daughter, your faith, your personal trust and confidence in me has restored you to health. Go in peace and be permanently healed from your suffering. Being unclean would no longer be an issue for her because Jesus made her whole. So whatever we might be facing right now, in order to find the strength to fight our way through the crowd to touch that one tiny piece of Jesus' cloak, let's allow our life to be interrupted with a confident assurance that even though we haven't seen Jesus, he loves us just as much to make us whole. We must trust with courage and without doubt that the power and authority of what Jesus did for this woman can and will be done for us. I thank you for sharing your time with me, and I'll talk with you again soon. Bye.